resume it now. Okay, so our agenda for the evening is a couple housekeeping announcements. We'll do some like death by PowerPoint review of the concepts for this week, and then we're gonna do live coding. We'll do a lot more live coding than anything else because PowerPoint is boring and code is actually far more interesting. So graded assignment 6 and all your other graded assignments must be submitted soon. I don't know exactly when. Greg will tell you, and hopefully you know because it's been announced more than once. But make sure you have all of those in so you can go on to Unit 2 and keep learning cool code stuff.
Monday by midnight.
There we go. Thank you so much. And this is the last lecture of Unit 1, and I get to do it. I'm not sure what y'all did to chase away Kyle and Clark, but bravo. I'm a little intimidated by it though, too, to be honest. All right, so let's get into our talking about Angular. Up until this point, when we talk about data binding, right? So the getting data from your TypeScript code into your HTML, we've been using this syntax here, right? So we use these double squigglies surrounded by some quotation marks, and that's how we get our data in. And for your prep work this week, or for today, we taught you a completely different way of doing it that involves using some brackets around the HTML attribute that you want to have set with a variable. Right now, I'm sure as you were doing this, your question was like, cool, this is great, because you see there's no difference in how it operates, right? You're probably like, why didn't you just teach me this to begin with, right? Why did you not just show us this bracket notation and skip this whole double squiggly marks notation? And I have a couple justifications behind it. The first one is probably one at this point you should be used to. And it's that we do this a lot, right? We've probably shown you 3 or 4 things at this point in this course where we're like, cool, you're going to do this way. And then you go a couple weeks and you're like, hey, remember that thing we taught you? Now we want you to do that exact same thing this way. And a lot of that is because as you go through your career, these changes in syntax, you're going to see them on different code in different places, right? So someone who got really comfortable writing code with one syntax, usually get stuck in their ways and they're going to keep writing that syntax. Whereas somebody who likes upgrading to all the newest syntax as they become available in newer versions is going to use that. And we want to make it so as you're looking through other people's code, you can really understand what the hell's going on. The other reason, and I don't know if this is a reason that launch code really thinks about when they do this, but one reason I really like it is this syntax with the double squigglies, what we're calling the old syntax that we're getting rid of, is a syntax that's used in a ton of templating engines. So if you go on to do, I'm not sure what your Unit 2 language is going to be, but I actually think it's the same in both C# and Java, where the templating engine, where you're going to take the data from your backend and show it in your web page and your front end HTML. They both use this double squigglies or the double curly brace syntax that we see here, right? And most templating engines use that. So it's good to know that this stuff is going to translate into other languages. So as you get used to it here, you can use it in other places. Excuse me. But we would prefer you use this newer syntax. This is really the preferred way of going with Angular now, is to use the bracket. For the purposes of spotting those variables within HTML attributes, the brackets are a lot easier to see as you're moving through code than the double curlies. And most IDEs with the double curlies, like we see in our example here, and you've probably seen within Visual Studio Code, they don't change the color of those double curlies as much as we'd like. You can change the settings in your IDE to make it change the color and make them stick out a little more, but those brackets stick out a whole lot more. So that's the reason behind that. But it's a really simple thing. I'm sure you messed around with it. When we get into our live coding, you'll see a little bit more of it. The other big thing from our prep this week was these attribute directives. Now, these are a little more interesting. So what these are going to do is they're going to dynamically update the styling and attributes through variables, right? Everything up until now, we've been either throwing in an inline change in our HTML, or we will just change something in our CSS and say, hey, we want to change our styling this way. But using these attribute directives allow us to change it dynamically from the TypeScript end. So we're just going to have a variable within the HTML, and then we will have something within our TypeScript that allows us to change that. So what's tired is using something like this, right? So an inline styling where we say, hey, the style, we want to change the color to black, the type to A. But what's wired is to use the attribute directive where we say, hey, style.color is something I'm going to have in my back end. And if I do this alternate color, if I want that to be true, do this. The same thing goes for the type and the bullet type. So this is actually a pretty cool thing here with Angular that makes this very easy. You can do some of this in React, but it's not quite as easy. Yeah, well, I won't bore you with that, but it's not quite as easy. I think this is super neat and a pretty cool part of React. So we are at, what time is it? 5:45, and I'm done with slides already. So do we have any questions just on the concept side of things? We're going to get into the implementation side here in a minute, but I want to pause and see if we have any questions just on the basic concept of what we're doing.
So are all of those inline stylings and the directives within the code returning as Booleans, all of them?
That's what you set them as, but if you're using a function on the back end, you can set them as Booleans, but by default, no, they're just going to be referencing your variable.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Anything else? Someone's typing, so I'm going to wait. Okay. Yeah, so somebody asked, the structural directives that we learned changed the HTML, and the attribute directions are learning to change your now CSS properties. So the attribute directives, trying to like scan through, because everything we use them for here, I believe, deals with CSS, but I believe the attribute directives can be used on things outside of CSS as long as an HTML attribute. So it doesn't necessarily have to be CSS. It just has to be an HTML or a tag attribute. But everything we do is going to, I think everything we do in our examples here is going to be with CSS. Cool, cool, cool. Let's get into some code. So what I've got up here is our exercise from this week. What I'm going to do, and I feel like for something like this, it's usually one of the easier things to do, is I'm going to work through the exercise. Now, ideally, you've already done this exercise yourself, but we're going to work through it, and I'm just going to go through each step. And as we go through, if something doesn't make sense to you, I want you to ask questions. And as we do each part, I want to talk about kind what we're doing, and especially when it deals with these attribute directives and the way we're doing the one-way data binding. Cool. Well, hope it's cool because that's what we're doing. So if you look at exercises, Angular part 3, so we got the starter code where we've got the flight simulator, right? So let me make sure I've got. All right, I am serving. Let me pull my HTML over. So back to our wonderful flight simulator that we worked on earlier in the course. So when we did this before, we did a lot of stuff using the DOM. I forget what those are called, where we manipulate the DOM to change things. This time we're going to do everything using the directives and our new variables. So this is going to be a lot more modern code. They're using the DOM commands like we did before. That's something you would have done maybe 10 years ago. Using Angular, some of the more advanced features of Angular like we are now is how you would do this here in 2021. So we got this starter code, and then they give us the list of requirements, which is the same as before, right? When we click the takeoff button, a bunch of stuff should happen. We click the land button, a bunch of stuff should happen. Same with the abort. And when we change our movement buttons here, our little rocket ship should change its location. Cool. So first thing they want us to do is to update our HTML. So if we look at our code and we look at our app component.ts, it's very basic. We've got some basic variables here. We have a color, height, width, and message variable. And the first thing they want us to do is to pass this message variable into our HTML. So that one's pretty easy because that's our current flight status. It's got this shuttle ready for takeoff. Get rid of that. And we're going to do, well, I don't know if they're supposed to be or not. We're just going to do message. Now, how many people, as you worked through this, we talk in the thing, they talk about using the brackets, right? They talk about putting brackets around things before variables. So how many people, as you worked through this, tried something like this? How many people tried that? Boy, this is hard without my chat because you can't tell me. Trying to scan through your pictures, just look for nodding, because I know some people did it. I do remember the first time I worked through this, I tried doing that. I'm like, oh yeah, cool. And it didn't work. And I'm like, all right. Well,
I didn't.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm like, well, this is stupid. The thing to note, and I don't know if the reading is super clear about it. This new syntax that we have, this is just for HTML attributes, right? So it's only going to be for the things like for changing the as we get down here, like the height, the width, the source of the image, things like that. The attributes of an HTML tag, not a variable between two tags, right? So for variables between two tags, we're still going to use we're still going to use the double curlies, and that's how we're going to get our variable up to the HTML. All right. So after we got that, they want us to go to line 19 and change the background. So this is an example, right? So this style is a tag attribute. So instead of saying style equals background color equals green, we're going to go ahead and change this to style.background color. We're going to put this in some brackets. And instead of defining it as green here in the HTML, we're going to say equals all right. And then the next thing they want us to do is to change the height property to determine the displayed height. So for this, we're going to come to down here. This is our displayed shuttle height. And again, we want to just double curlies and height. That's that one's actually called, right? Yeah. So if we save this, we go back here, it re-rendered, absolutely nothing changed. I'm a big believer that like if I change something and it didn't change, even if I know it's not supposed to change, I want to see it change. So I'm going to change this to blue. Space off is ready for takeoff, dude, because NASA went surfer on us, I guess. So I changed nothing in the HTML. All I changed are my variables here. I come back. Cool. So my changes worked, right? So I know that the things that are coming through as variables or that I want to come through as variables actually are. All right. That seems simple enough. Let's move on to the next part. So the next thing they want us to do is we're going to start manipulating our buttons. So we've got all these buttons here. We want to start doing stuff with them. So first thing they say is to add an event listener to our takeoff button. So I have my takeoff button down here. For my event listener, we've done this a few times at this point. Click equals our method. We're going to call this method handle takeoff. Or not a method, it's a function. No, it's a method because it's in a class. I'm very pedantic about the difference in methods and functions. If you're not familiar, functions are not part of classes, methods are part of classes. This is a class, so I'm about to add a method to it. And then for this, they actually straight up define it for us. We'll go ahead and just copy paste this in and talk about it. So handle takeoff gives us a confirmation window that we can either confirm or decline. And if we confirm, it changes a bunch of attributes here that we defined within this class. So let's test that out. Uh-oh. We broke something.
There's an extra parentheses on line 36.
Extra parentheses, there is. Good eye. We won't talk about how long it would have probably taken me to find that one. Nice catch. Excellent. Cool. All right, and then from there, they want us to do the same thing for our land and abort mission buttons. So let's do that real quick. Copy this. I'm going to change this one to handle land. Are you sure you want to return to Earth? We want to make double sure someone actually wants to come back to Earth. Because that feels like it could be a mistake. Change that to 0 and then let's do the abort. Let's do that. All right, so we got our methods, and now let's add our handlers to our HTML. All right, let's test it out. Take off, yep. Land, yep. Abort mission, no. Take off. Abort mission, no. So our abort mission button is not working. What do we do?
Are methods always within the quotation in the HTML file?
With here in the HTML, yeah, because these are coming in as, I mean, let's try it without and see what happens. Well, maybe not that one because that one's busted already. Let's handle one we know works. Let's find out. So that is without quotations. Should have re-rendered. And it still works.
Oh, nice.
So I will say, this is one of those things with JavaScript and TypeScript where like there's tons of things that work that maybe shouldn't, right? So like think about semicolons. That's a great example in JavaScript. Good JavaScript style says you should use semicolons at the end of every line. Will JavaScript still work if you don't put semicolons at the end of every line? Yup. Same thing with quotations. Good JavaScript style. So most style guides that you use for JavaScript, if you're not familiar with the style guide, every language has conventions, and then there are style guides. So conventions are things that like every single person who writes this language does. And that governs things like how you write your variables. So like in JavaScript and Java, we use camel case for our variables, whereas in Python, we use snake case. Those are conventions. Style guides are longer bits of directives that say, hey, this is what makes good style for writing this language. And a lot of those are developed by companies. And then those companies distribute that style. And it's like, hey, this is how we do it. Maybe you should do it the same way. For JavaScript, and it carries into TypeScript, the most common style guide is the Airbnb style guide. And yeah, it is that Airbnb. Most of the industry uses the standard that they set for writing good JavaScript. And it says you use single quotes and never double quotes unless you are writing quotes within quotes. So this is a case where these methods work without quotes. Anytime I've ever learned this and used this, we use quotes. So it feels like the right way to do it, but apparently it works without it. Welcome to the world of TypeScript and JavaScript, where everything feels made up.
I hate when it comes to using an apostrophe as quotes though.
Yeah, that's fair. I think a lot of people are like that.
What if wouldn't you always have to use double quotes if you're going to have a word within quotes that uses an apostrophe in the word? Like in
There's something called character escaping you can use instead. But a lot of people do use the double quotes with a single quote as well.
Yeah.
Somebody asked, oh, this is a good question. So JavaScript doesn't have something official like Python's PEP 8. No, it doesn't. The closest thing you'll get is the style guides. And like I said, the Airbnb ones is adopted throughout the industry. I have never been anywhere that uses a different one. The closest I've ever seen are people who just straight up don't use style guides. So cool, let's move on. Oh, let's fix the abort mission one. Let's fix that. What did we do wrong there? Handle abort mission. Oh, we just named it wrong. So it should be handle mission abort. All right, let's save it. Let's run it. Abort mission. Cool. Back to our code. So the next thing they want us to do are the movement buttons. So we're going to do up, down, left, and right. And they gave us the formula, which is nice. But again, instead of using the DOM tag, we are going to do this within the code itself. So the first thing they want us to do is to add the here within our HTML, our rocket image, the tag to help us find it. And then from there, oh, they want us to also add the handler, the click handler. So on the right, they say. And then we're going to give it a couple parameters of rocket image and string right. Oops, I put this in the wrong spot. You know what? While we're here, go ahead and just add them all. Pew. So up, down. Cool, cool. Now let's actually write the method for this. Let's go ahead and do this one up here. All right, so we're going to call this one move rocket. We already said we want to take in two parameters, rocket, image, and direction. And then, so we're going to say if the direction equals, triple equals, right. Movement. We'll do that parse int. So we're going to use that formula they gave us above. Rocket image dot style dot left. Right. So what I'm saying here is we're going to parse int on whatever we have for the left side on the rocket image style. And then we want to add 10 to that. And that's going to be what we hold in this movement variable. So then we're going to update the rocket image. Left to equal movement. Then we're going to say this dot width. 10,000. All right, let's check this out. So this should move our rocket to the right. Let's save our files. Try it out. Take off. Move right. Cool, it's moving right. It works. And then after that, they want us to do the other directions. I should have saw that one coming. Okay. 1 second. All right, I'm going to straight up cheat on this one so we don't have to just copy the same thing 4 times. We're just going to paste that in. All right, so this will cover all of our movements, left, down, and then if we don't have down, we default to up. Let's try it out. Take off. Up, 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 up. Right. Cool. So the big difference there from what we did in the past is just how we get our rocket, right? And passing that rocket into our method here instead of using the DOM handler. All right, and then like any good customer, oh wait, one more. Update the control button click handler along these same lines. We want to modify pass in rocket image to your land and abort handlers. Add the following. Rocket style that bottom. Yeah, so we want to add in this. So we want to return the rocket to our handlers for landing and where does rocket image come from here though? All right. Cool. So that'll return our spaceship to its launch position if we do either of those. All right, so like any good customer, they gave us a bunch of requirements. We gave them a product, and then they're like, oh, cool, now we have new requirements for you. Because every single customer in the history of tech is going to do this to you every single time. So now they want to make it so we basically do some error handling. So right now the user can move the rocket before it's actually taken off, right? So if I come here, if I move without takeoff, I can move the rocket. That doesn't make any sense. So they want us to handle that. So let's do that one first. And that one's pretty easy. So we're going to add a takeoff enabled. So as of right now, when we try and take off, no, we can do is we can add a Boolean here. Let's do that. So we can say take off so by default, we're going to set this to true. Right, so the takeoff button will be usable by default. And we're going to do that check. Oh, that's right. This should be TypeScript. This is what I'm saying about there's no rules. I didn't give it a type, and in TypeScript you're supposed to, but it doesn't actually enforce it. So TypeScript doesn't enforce type safety the way it should. There's just no rules. So after that, we want to update our buttons to have the to do a check to see if the enabled is set or not. So easiest way to do that is going to come to our HTML. And we can do within our button, we can say can add this little disabled. Take off enabled. So it's going to look to that variable. And we'll do the opposite for these buttons. All right. Land. And then we want to make sure we update that takeoff enabled here in our TypeScript. So we'll say, if we do the takeoff, we want to set this dot takeoff enabled to false. And we want to come back down here and do the opposite. True. All right, let's see if that save our file. We did not. Let's see if that worked. Cool. So takeoff enabled is set. If I hit takeoff, it switches. Awesome. If I land, womp womp. Let's see what we did wrong there. So this time when I hit land, it's not re-enabling my takeoff button. Okay, so that looks fine. So these are set to true as they're supposed to be. It's in the right method. What do we think? What am I missing here?
Put it to where if you hit the land to re-enable, then you put takeoff enabled true.
Yep, I've got that right here.
If you go to your HTML file, there's, I can't remember exactly, I'm gonna have to look through the book, but there's something to do with within the button HTML tag where takeoff enabled would reverse. Like takeoff enabled equals not takeoff enabled or something like that.
Yeah, that's what the bang, the exclamation point
Mhm.
should be doing.
Does it matter that you're not calling them out Booleans?
I'm sorry?
In the TS file, did you need to call them out as a Boolean? Boolean?
We did up here. This is actually taking the step from like me pretending I'm trying to teach to me actually being kind of puzzled on why that's not working correctly. It's interesting because it should be takeoff enabled is true, takeoff enabled is true.
Can you inspect the element and do a console log of what the Booleans are set to see what it is in real time? Make sure it's not something going on there.
Yeah, we could potentially do that. Let's I like that idea. Let's do, as we click handle land, we'll do it at the end here. Add a
Do you
console.
need the SEM on the line above 56? It shouldn't matter, but at the end.
Oh. Let's see. Let's see if that was it. All right. Now that was a good thought, and coming as a Java programmer, like missing semicolons, breaking stuff is straight up would make sense. Good thought though. This is spelled correctly. That's a common gotcha, just like a small spelling error.
Can you add a different like click to one tag?
So another click handler.
Yeah, so you can only have one click handler, right?
I believe so. This is that's something I've never actually tried, just because it's really bad practice, for sure, because it's just going to make your code more unwieldy.
Yeah. I just found in the book what I was thinking of, but they have the click handler. So you have it where it calls a function.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure if the disabled I don't know if it does the same thing that I'm thinking of.
Oh, I see.
They're flipping the Boolean on click.
So do we see a difference? You're onto something there with the methods. So my method here for handle takeoff, handle land, and handle mission abort. Right? We see those.
Mhm.
And then we look at our methods here. What's different? Does anybody see it? Call it out if you see it.
Are you missing the parentheses, the brackets?
The
You're missing
argument.
the argument, yeah.
Yeah, the parameter here. That's what we're missing. So we made that change to now where these These methods require this argument. So I'm not providing it here. So now if I do rocket image, go back, take off. Perfect. Great job. Great debugging, everyone. That was 100% planned. That wasn't actually a mistake on my end. I am the world's most perfect coder. I don't make mistakes ever. All right, let's go back. All right, let's go back to the exercise here. Another improvement they want is they want to make it so we cannot move the rocket if it hasn't taken off. We got that one. Takeoff enabled. Yeah, we got that one. Advantage of our.
On line 25, what is the B after the container right?
Stray typo. Cool. This all looks good. So the last thing we want to do then is we only want these buttons to be useful if takeoff has been enabled. So for that, we can use, as they call it, our good friend, ngIf, and we can add that here to our div. I'm going to leave that class container on there. We'll do ngIf. We're going to say takeoff enabled is false. So now we come back, we take off, those buttons are active. No, they're not there at all. It's exactly what we want. Then the last thing they want is to change the background color if the rocket gets too close to the edge. So add a function to your component that'll check the width and height values and changes the color to orange if these values are too high or low. So let's come back to our TypeScript code. And we will call this method, I'm going to do this here at the top. We'll do it like they call it. We'll call it gutter check. And taking a width and a height. If since right now our window, you know, it's 260,000 pixels, so 260. Four is less than 0. So if any of those come into play, we're going to say color equals orange. Otherwise, we're going to say this dot color should be blue. So it's the color we want. So we've got that method, and then we're going to have that method run here at the end of our move rocket. So we'll do this dot gutter check. We're going to pop in this dot width and this dot height. save it, take off. Up, left. Cool. So let's review kind of the new way we did some of this stuff, right? A lot of this, the changes for a lot of this was, well, this exact thing is this exact exercise is something we did before. But the biggest changes we did were here in our HTML, right? We added the attribute directive here with our new styling as well, with using the brackets instead of our curly braces. And this allows us to use all of this using variables instead of trying to define it in the inline HTML. 1 second, it's about to get real loud. All right. So there's not a lot of new content here. The main thing with a big part of this exercise is to really just give you more experience writing some Angular, right? Doing some, creating another UI and making those changes. And you're going to get a little more experience with that in your studio this evening. Somebody asked if we'd open the console panel, would we have seen that error earlier? Let's find out. That's a really good question. So let's break this again. And let's open the developer tools. Go to the console. We hit takeoff. We hit land. So yeah, it cannot read property style undefined. And if we look at our debugger, see if it gives us a good place to look for where the error would have been. So it tells us, if we look here, it says an app component.handle land. So it tells us where the, what method has the error, but you'll notice it isn't super specific on what the error is. So this may have helped us track it down a little sooner. But this is a common thing with the stack trace you get from any front end framework, whether it's Angular or React, is the error messaging is not super helpful, unfortunately. So it'll help you get to the spot, but finding the exact issue, it can be somewhat tough. You just kind of got to push through it and dig a little bit. So because this says an app.component TS line 75. So it would have narrowed it down. I wouldn't have narrowed it down at all because that's not correct. So, but it gets you there. It would have pointed you to the right method to look at.
Well, 75 is where we're first calling rocket image. You'd see that you didn't have the.
Good catch. Yeah. Because I'm calling this variable that doesn't exist. That's awesome. I didn't even, awesome catch, whoever that was. There's always the possibility that these error messages are fine and it's totally just cool. So that's really all I've got for you as far as examples here. So let's come back here. Well, before I do that, do we have any other questions about what we covered in the new stuff or anything like that? Or anything we did here in the example?
I have a question about, I often like to look back at these lectures on
Yeah.
YouTube. Is this going to be up on your YouTube, Kyle's YouTube?
I'll be sending it to Kyle.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. The code I can try to think of the best way to do. How does Kyle typically get you the code for his because with JavaScript it's a little trickier since you've got multiple files.
Does it on his Git?
All right. I'm probably not
Yeah,
going to do that. I'll probably zip this up and throw it into here into Slack. So then you just have to unzip it and run it. Any other questions?
How does it work? I've been wondering this for a while. How do you zip a file?
It really depends on your operating system, and there's a lot.
Well, what about Windows 10?
Windows 10, it's actually real easy. Just click on whatever folder you want, right click on it, and you should see something that says like compress or send to zip or something like that.
Okay, and then what was the other thing I wanted to ask? I don't remember. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Awesome.
Hey, oh, can I ask a quick question?
No.
Darn you. Where was it that you defined the Boolean for takeoff enabled? I think I missed that spot exactly on the.
Yeah, it's going to be up here with the rest of our class variables.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Hey, one other thing, just because for everyone, because you can tell I copy pasted this. There's a few things I'm like a real hard ass about, and it comes from style guides. You'll notice I did const here for when I'm declaring this variable. Every single JavaScript developer who doesn't like get their face pounded in by style guides will use let. If you're ever going to work someplace that uses linters and enforces styling, get used to declaring your variables with const and only changing them to let when you need to change them. So you'll notice I'm never changing this movement variable within this scope. So it's going to be declared as const instead of let. Again, Kyle probably uses let. Most people do unless they have style guides beating them in the face. I get style guides beating me in the face at work. I have to use them. And it's a heck of a lot easier to get used to using const than it is to try and get used to using let and then have to make the change later. So I just want to point that out. This is something I try and drill into everyone learning JavaScript. Get used to using const when you declare your variables instead of let. Your life will be easier down the road.
What about using var?
Don't use var.
I know.
That one's easy. That's an easy answer. All right. So here's my confession. This means nothing to you guys because I didn't teach you Angular this entire time. I just taught it today. But when I teach this before, and I guess Kyle told you at the beginning that he mainly does React. He doesn't typically do Angular. And that's the same for me. So this is where I would make my confession that, yo, I've been sitting here teaching you Angular and I've been learning it along with you. And that's not like a haha, I'm incredibly unqualified to be teaching you moment, because I do feel like I'm qualified. But it's to point out that once you learn some of these frameworks, picking up new ones is really not very hard.
I don't get this.
I'm explaining it right now.
Oh, okay.
So once you learn one thing in this profession, learning the next thing gets progressively easier, especially when you're just dealing with different frameworks like JavaScript and React. So the whole point is I'm trying to make here is like, you should never be afraid of any new thing that you don't know, right? You're going to start seeing these parallels with every new thing you learn. When you move into Unit 2, whether you're using C# or Java, you're going to see all the parallels between those and JavaScript, because all of them share a common ancestry in the C language, right? So whole point is, don't be afraid of any of this stuff. I see a lot of early developers try and pigeonhole themselves into like, I am a JavaScript developer or I am a backend developer. Forget that, right? you're going to have to do some of that just to find that first job, but you need to think of yourself as a developer, right? You are a software developer. Languages don't matter. You can learn the new language, right? So that's my soapbox for the evening. I hope you guys kind of take that to heart. Just don't be afraid of new stuff. But that is all I got. We're a little early-ish than normal. I assume. I don't know when you guys typically end. So we're going to get back together at 8 to go over the studio. But for now, let's break into groups. I don't know how long you guys typically take for a break. So take however long Kyle normally tells you to take, and then go to your studio groups, and I'll see you guys at 8.
Kyle
Thanks,
never
Mike.
lets us take breaks.
Thank you.
Oh, he doesn't let you take breaks, man.
No.
Thanks, Mike.
See ya.
He's a pretty horrible person. Thanks, Mike. Have a good night.
Mike, thank you so much.
See you in a bit.
So as people are signing off real quick, I'm gonna say, hey, Mike, what's your availability this weekend?
For what?
I'm struggling a little bit and trying to find a little extra time for assignment 5.
I can help tomorrow evening for a little bit and sometime on Sunday.
What about okay, so your last name sounds familiar. Do you by any chance know the company Centrix LLC
I don't.
or CPI?
Nope.
Okay, you know the company that does the software for Shutterfly as well as the Santas at the mall?
I don't know. I'm sorry.
Oh, my dad owns that company. I was wondering if you knew him. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Mike. I'll shoot you a message.
Yeah, sounds good.
Perfect.